Hey, is the scientific method a little bit too rigid for you? Or does forensic necromancy sound like something you wish you could have majored in college? Well, if so, you're going to want to stay tuned because I might have a job for you in a necrofactorium. All right, so today I am super excited because we are talking about Warmachine. So I know I haven't done a lot of Warmachine content on the channel before, and that is going to change very soon, starting with this video. So very briefly, my experience with the game, I started playing back in Mark II and played for a good chunk of Mark III. But then when the game transitioned from Mark III to Mark IV, that's kind of when I stepped away. So a lot of the armies that I played would have been considered legacy armies, and at the launch of Mark IV, Privateer Press had promised that those armies would eventually get rules and be rolled into Mark IV, but it was sort of not their main priority. They were trying to push out new factions, new models, and even though they looked good and they were super cool and everything, it was actually really expensive to build one of the new forces. So now that some time has passed, all of the old armies have rules, and most importantly, the IP was recently purchased by Steamforged Games. I'm assuming if you're watching this video, you probably know that, but if you don't, Privateer Press no longer owns it, even though they are still involved with the project. Steamforged Games now has control over the direction and production and distribution of Warmachine. And so one of the biggest changes that they're making to the system is that they're making it super easy for new players to come on board, which I think is going to be great for helping the game grow in the future. Now, I'm going to throw a picture up on the screen here that kind of shows the way things used to be and how they are now for new players jumping in. So, in the past, you had to buy a super expensive, I think it was roughly $200 box to, essentially get started with a force. And then you had to make another super expensive kind of all in one purchase if you wanted to expand on that force. What Steamforged Games has done has broken those boxes into smaller, more digestible chunks so that you can, buy a cheaper starter, start playing your games and, get familiar with the rule set right away. And then when you're ready to expand a little bit, there's another box you can get. So you can stretch those purchases out over a greater period of time, and it doesn't quite hit your pockets the same way. Now, as you could tell from the intro, today we are going to focus on the Cryx Necrofactorium Command Starter set, which, big shout out to Steamforged Games. They actually sent me a copy of this to review on the channel, and super thankful to them. But more importantly, I am thankful for all of you, the viewers who keep coming back, watching the videos. This is actually the first time I've gotten promo review materials before, but this is the first time I've actually got something ahead of the official release, so that I can get video content done and get it out for everybody to get hype and enjoy. So this is really only possible because of you viewers who keep coming back and subscribe to the channel. So massive thank you to all of you. Now, let's actually dive into Cryx and what a Necrofactorium is. So if you're like me, even though I had exposure to Warmachine in the past, I never actually played Cryx. I got started with the Retribution of Syra, dabbled a little bit in the Horde side of things with some Circle, and then crossed back over to the Iron Kingdoms and did a little Signar and a little Khador. So the way the lore was distributed back then, it was actually in your faction, army books. So they'd have like little short stories and whatnot. And then there was also the Iron Kingdoms role-playing game, which I never played back then. So I didn't really know much about Cryx outside of how they performed on the tabletop. And so now with, Mark IV and the transition to Steamforged games, the lore is actually distributed to subscribers of their app, which they have on Apple and Android. And every week there's new short stories and everything. So, highly recommend if you guys are interested in the lore and you're a narrative gamer like me, go check that app out. The subscription's relatively cheap. Don't quote me on when I say it's like maybe $5 a month. But in addition to the lore, it lets you make unlimited army lists for all the factions. So it's actually, it's not that bad of a purchase. But anyway, that let me do a little bit of research into Cryx so that I could talk about them intelligently as we go through this video. So like any good story, the story of Cryx starts with a dragon. So there was this dragon, his name's Torok, and he was kind of lonely. And so dragons in this universe, their heart is a crystal that the body kind of grows around, and they apparently can break off slivers of their heart, and then a new baby dragon will grow. And so Torok was lonely. Apparently he was the only dragon left. So he split his heart into a bunch of little shards and created a whole bunch of little children. Unfortunately, they were all very much like him, that is to say, evil bastards, and they turned on their dad. So the whole gang of them decided to gang up on their dad, and they had a huge fight, literally called the Dragon War. And Turok didn't die, but he didn't win. So he, tucked his tail between his legs, flew off to the Shard Islands, and maybe if I can find a map, I'll put that up on the screen and show you guys where that is so you have a point of reference. So now, the Shard Islands at that point was the home of lots of little pirate kings. So he went to the pirate kings. There were, I believe, 14 or so of them. And he was like, hey, you guys should serve me because I'm a dragon. And all but 2 of them agreed. Those 2 died horribly. All the rest of the pirate kings got turned into liches. He just made them undead lich kings. And that's how Cryx was formed. So as you can imagine, being that they were pirates in life, amoral, ne'er-do-wells, in death, their morals probably eroded a little bit further. And now, on top of everything, they were taught necromancy. So they kind of developed their society in isolation in their little island domain. Occasionally they do pirate raids, for resources and whatnot. But then they stumbled on this incredible field of study called forensic necromancy, where somebody would die, presumably somebody who had a lot of knowledge, say, about how to make warjacks. They would raise them from the dead, or they would coerce their spirit if it was still bound to the mortal realm, and they'd learn all of their secrets and just kind of hoard all of that with all of their necromantic knowledge. So that's kind of how Cryx technology came to be. Now, what exactly is a Necrofactorium, and why is this the thing that is now in Warmachine representing Cryx? Well, so in Cryx, in their modern day infrastructure, you've got 2 really, really important sort of technologists, or arcanists, as they're called in universe. So you have Necrotechs, who are the people who take all of this knowledge that they plumb from the undead and turn it into, Cryx technology. And then you have necrosurgeons, who their primary, function is taking raw material, usually dead bodies, as well as this horrible fuel source called necrotite, and they create, undead minions, source bones for bone jacks, all sorts of stuff like that. Well, as you can imagine, they're a little paranoid, mad scientist types, and for hundreds of years they would kind of work alone in their own little labs, and they would make huge advancements, but it would take decades. So the Lich Lords had this great idea. What if we take all of these paranoid people who are constantly worried about if someone does better than them, then they might die because they lost their lord's favor. What if we force them to work together in a lab, and we call that a necrofactorium? And that's exactly what a necrofactorium is. So you'll take a bunch of necrotechs and a bunch of necrosurgeons, force them to work in a giant lab complex that usually also has its own mining facilities to mine necrotite, which is their main fuel source. And they will get to share resources and quote unquote work together to, make advancements a lot sooner. Now, Cryx has some of these necrofactoriums in, their domain, but the really successful ones are actually over in Western Immoren. So Cryx will occasionally send an expedition, and they like to find either sites near battlefields or sites near, technological centers of various countries, and they will build a facility underground, usually in tunnels and caves underneath like mountain ranges. And they have a long-standing sort of pseudo-partnership with the Cephalics, who are human mad scientists that already live in these cave structures underneath the major Immoren kingdoms. So they'll smuggle all their supplies in and everything and set up shop deep underground where nobody is going. And they just kind of quietly amass, fuel and legions of undead mechanothralls and jacks. And all of these necrofactoriums will also have a standing army, usually a Warcaster or two, just in case, they need to go fight somebody, assassinate someone, or God forbid, somebody happens to find, the Necrofactorium, they have a way of defending themselves. Now, slightly before present day Immoren, there was that whole infernal invasion, and all of the necrofactoriums that Cryx had on the mainland kind of got wiped out. The infernals didn't really care, where the souls came from. They were just like, we need souls. You guys made a deal, and it's time for you guys to pay up. So they lost all of their necrofactoriums on the mainland, and so the infernals, went away. They got stopped, and now the Orgoth are getting ready to invade Immoren. But before they do, they went to the Cryx and they were like, "Hey, so your dragon god guy really hates his kids, right? Well, we got one of his kids like little heart shards. So if you help us in the invasion, we just need help killing a god, nothing big. We'll give you guys this heart shard." So the Cryx are like, "Hey, well, killing Turok's kids is actually our whole purpose for being, so that sounds great." So the Orgoth, not really being all that smart, it's more brain, or I'm sorry, more brawn over brain. They were like, "Cool, that sounds great. Here's the heart shard, so hope you guys hold up your end of the bargain." So the Cryx give the heart shard to Turok. that revitalizes him, and he, rather than kind of sleeping and, talking in his sleep and nodding off like an old grandpa, now he's like, okay, it's time to go burn some stuff down. I need to go kill the rest of my kids. So, in order to comply with his commands, they started establishing new necrofactoriums on the mainland. So that's enough lore rambling. Let me take you guys down to the hobby desk. We'll crack this open and we'll take a look at these miniatures that come in the starter set. All right, so we're down at the hobby desk. So as you'll notice on all of the new Steamforge Games branded box sets, got the SFG logo down there instead of Privateer Press. And it's also going to have this little QR code that you can scan to learn more details about what comes in the box. That lets them simplify their packaging. And I'm sorry, let me zoom out just a little bit. There we go. So that lets them simplify their packaging so that their packaging can work for any faction. So when you open this up, this little Cryx sheet is literally just an insert in here that comes right out and would actually kind of make a cool little, if you got it framed or something, stick it up on your wall. Nice little art piece. And then we've got these generic white boxes inside that house our stuff. So there we go. So we've got all of the miniatures out of the packaging. So for people who are unfamiliar, all of the current range of Warmachine products are 3D printed. Steamforge has said that we will get some plastics coming in the near future, hips that is. But for right now, everything is 3D printed. Now, as a 3D print enthusiast myself, I am curious to see what kind of quality they were able to get out of these. So this first package, this looks like this is going to be our character Warjack. So let's just get these pieces out of there. Alright, that's everything. And so we've got the main body here. And I mean, the quality, let me get this closer to the camera and get the focus going. The quality is actually very, very nice. I'm not seeing noticeable, to the naked eye layer lines. And now we do have some very, very fine support material. Is the camera picking this up? There we go. Yeah, so you can see right here, we've got some fine support material. If you just take a hobby knife, preferably a sharp one, and just run it, that'll just break right off. No problems. So looks like I did have an unfortunate break right there on the foot, but it looks like it was a fairly clean break. Yeah, so that'll be a fairly easy super glue job to fix. Then, so the jack that comes in here is a character jack, aptly named Hades. So most Warjacks for the game are magnetizable for the arms and the head, but since it's a character jack, it looks like they're making these to just be, static poses, so no hot swapping needed or, required. It looks like all of the sockets for everything are the correct size and things slot together very, very nice. We've got this cool little bladed shield. And then one of the cool things about 3D printing, so like this little buzzsaw that's in the hand in order for you to get that kind of a detail out of a traditional mold, like you would have had to have this in a ton of parts. But because it's 3D printed, that just prints all as one piece, which is very, very awesome. So that is Hades, and let's move on to our next model. All right, so next up we've got our Warcaster, Nekane, and this model is actually only two pieces, which I am very, very happy to see. But again, incredible detail here. Again, no noticeable layer lines. Very, very clean print. And all of those remaining supports, just like I showed you guys, are super, super fine and will come off with a sharp hobby blade very, very easily. Yeah, the surface of the model looks good too. So like some of the larger supports that they would have taken off at the factory haven't left like little pot marks or anything in the finish of the model. Also, so far, the two models I've looked at have been well cured. But yeah, so there's our Warcaster. Let's move on to the next guy. So this is going to be our character unit from the box, which are going to be some Wraith undead models named the Furies. So these are actually super cool because they're wraiths, the armor is actually hollow. So up in the slot where the head would be, that's actually a support in there that you can take out, but the whole armor is hollow. Really love the flame details coming off of the clawed hands and these long flowy robes. And there's also subtle differences between all of the sculpts since they are characters. Looks like this one might have had a piece of something that broke off and then cured on the robes. So that might take a little doing to... There we go. Easy peasy. And then our last little guy. And again, really the only cleanup that I'm seeing, which is to be expected with 3D prints, is just cleaning up those supports, which will be nice and easy. I do want to mention, these are fully cured. There's no smell of resin. It's not sticky. These are actually very well cured. So happy to see that as well. And we've got one more model to look at. Let's get that out of the packaging. All right, so last but not least for the box, we've got a character solo, which is going to be Master Necrotech Chatterbain. So just a nice, easy two-part print. Slots together. It's keyed already, just like that. Little bit of cleanup needed to get those supports off. But again, that's par for the course for 3D prints. And with as fine as these supports are, you shouldn't have any problems with them whatsoever. And it looks like, so I don't know if my camera will pick this up. Let me try and focus. There we go. So it looks like they put their really heavy supports on the bottoms of the figures, and that's where you're going to see that pop marking in the surface. But then that lets you get, a virtually clean top surface that will paint very, very nicely. So I'm actually very, very pleased with the quality of the miniatures, and I will take a moment and get these all assembled and show you guys what they look like. But before I do, you might be wondering, okay, so I got my command starter for the faction of my choice, in this case, Cryx. So, I've got my 30 point, starter army. Where do I go from here? Well, if you're looking to make that next jump into 50-point games, the next product that you're going to want to look at is the Battle Group box set for your faction. Now, Steamforged Games was kind enough to send me an early version of this. Uh, we're not going to look at it in this video. I'm going to make another video, and once that's out, I'll put a link up in the cards. But this is going to give you another Warcaster, another Warjack, and then, in this case, 2 Light Jacks that will get you up to that 50-point level. And again, it's a nice, smaller, purchase. You're not kicking out a ton of money all at once for you to start expanding your force. But okay, let me go away, build these models, and I'll show you what they look like. Alright, so here we are with the assembled miniatures. It probably took me about 15 minutes to get all the supports cleaned off and get everything glued. So not that much time at all. So here is Nekane. And then we've got our 3 Furies. I really love that hollow armor design. That'll look really cool with some like OSL effects in there. And we got one more. Really blown away by these prints. I'm, fairly a novice when it comes to printing in resin, and none of my prints have ever looked this clean. I'm also sure they've got way better 3D printers than what I personally have access to. Here is Chatterbain, and I missed a support right there. But this is probably my favorite looking model out of the whole set. As a Necrotech, he's going to be helping you keep your constructs up and running, your Warjacks, and he just looks absolutely crazy. And then lastly, we've got our big boy, Hades. And there we've got it. So that is the Necrofactorium starter, command starter, I should say. Zoom out so we can get the full picture. So, like I said earlier, I'm going to be looking at the next expansion, the Battle Group box expansion coming up here soon. And then we'll work on getting these guys painted. Now, if you are interested in either the Cryx Necrofactorium stuff, or if you're interested in any of the other factions for Warmachine, they are all available for pre-order from Steamforged Games. The Cryx stuff will be releasing at the end of August. And then all the other factions, since they've taken over the game, so your Signar, your Khador, Dusk, and all the other new Warmachine factions, all of those models are currently shipping right now. So if you head over to the Steamforged Games website or your friendly local game store, you should be able to find them. They've got increased production capacity online for the US and Europe. So you shouldn't really have any problems locating their products in the store of your choice. I'm super excited for this quote-unquote Warmachine resurgence. Let me know what you guys think of the new command starters, specifically the Necrofactorium for Cryx, down in the comments. Also, let me know if you guys would be interested in more, lore type videos. I don't really do a whole lot of those, but for something like this where I didn't really know much about the faction going into it, it was really fun for me to, go through the app, read some of those short stories, and kind of see what I'd be getting myself into. Now, don't worry, I'm not a full-on Cryx convert. I do have some Khador and some Signar in the wings, waiting for those pre-orders to actually hit my doorstep, and we'll be doing some videos for that stuff as well. So keep it locked in here. Thank you all so much for watching. Thanks again to Steamforged Games for sending this out for me to review, and I'll catch you all in the next video.